to Raw. Raw is real authentic women talking about various topics that help to elevate other people. I'm here today with Beth Gatchell, who I've known for a very long time in the fitness industry, and we used to work together at one point in time. And Beth is the Chief Joy Officer of Sage Yoga and Healing Arts LLC. She's a yoga teacher, a Thai body worker, and a musician. And you combine some of those things, right?
I do, yeah.
Which I think is so fun and fascinating. Today's topic is things you didn't know about yoga. This sounds pretty interesting. I think a lot of people think that they know about yoga out there, but what you're going to tell us today, I think, is quite different than most people have heard. Welcome to Raw, and thanks for joining me here today.
Oh, thank you, Tammy. I am so glad to be here. I'm excited about this.
Yeah, me too. We've been talking about this for a really long time, and unfortunately schedules and whatever else, but you have some really, every time I talk to you, you always have really neat and unique things that even are new to me, and I've been in the industry for over 30 years.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So first, before we even get started, we should probably talk about what is yoga. And that may sound like a silly question to some people, right? Because we know yoga, right? People take classes for yoga all the time, but I think a lot of people have a tendency to think that yoga is a class that you take as part of your fitness routine that helps you become more flexible and relaxes you. But from your perspective, and from our conversations, yoga is so much more than that. So can you tell the viewers what yoga is to you?
Sure. So to me, the classes that most Westerners take involve intentional breath, usually some kind of movement, and then a relaxation at the end. There are many other aspects of yoga too that include chanting and meditation and things like that. But I think it's a system of self-development. It comes originally from India, and there's a whole spectrum of classes that are available, some that are super relaxing, and some that are really vigorous, and some that are somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I like how it's a self-development process, a self-development pursuit in a sense. I've never heard of yoga being a part of a self-development plan.
Yeah, I think it is. I think there's a lot of growth that happens in yoga as we're learning to breathe and combining breath with movement and listening to ourselves and getting present. I think it's a beautiful process for growth and self-development as well.
Yeah.
Lots of other benefits too, lots of other physical benefits.
Yeah, I think that's different than the way we typically think about fitness, right? I think we think about fitness, my experience is people are always thinking about either maintaining their fitness program, their regimen, or progressing it, right, to hit the next level. But when you think about personal development, it's more well-rounded than that. It might be cyclical in nature, where you kind of visit certain things and then visit other things and then revisit some elements of that growth in yoga.
Yeah, well said.
Thanks. So how does yoga work in ways to help people feel better?
Yeah, so the breathing, so we do intentional breathing, and deep are great for the nervous system. They help to invoke this rest and digest mode that I think we'll get into a little bit later. In the classes that have movement to them, we're stretching or we're lengthening. I like to say we're lengthening, we're strengthening, we're releasing muscle tension, we're creating body balance. Because I like how, like in the sun salutation, which is a flowing series of 12 postures, we strengthen a muscle and then we lengthen that muscle. So that's wonderful too. And I also love that the end part, we always rest at the end. So whatever kind of movement we're doing, we always come back to restoration at the end. And that's another benefit to the body and inducing that rest and digest mode.
That's my favorite part, I have to say. I've always done a lot of weight training. And so the first time I did yoga, and I've only done it a handful of times, but I'm getting into that sort of stuff more because I've always been like this A-type personality where I want to go, go, go. And then I get into yoga class and I need to slow down. And I know there are different types of yoga. I think maybe I would have appreciated some of the more intense classes, but the reality is I probably needed the less intense classes because of my personality. And it's difficult. I mean, it's hard. It's hard because for somebody who goes to kind of calm and settle down into something that's not as intense is difficult. But also, if you're not used to those movements, it's hard. Like I could go lift a bunch of weight in the gym, but when you're holding your body in a particular posture for a length of time that you have never done before, no matter how long you've been working out, it's really tough. So like I said, I really appreciate those rest periods.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, that's how I got into yoga, was when I was a senior in college, which has been a minute now. But the seniors were the ones that could get into the yoga class because we had the first pick, classes before anyone else. So my last quarter of college, I took that because I thought, oh, I just get to go and sleep for an hour.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, it's always, that's one of those easy classes where you think it's an easy class, but then it changes your life, right?
Absolutely. It totally did. I've practiced for about 26 years now.
Wow. Yeah, unexpectedly, fitness did that for me. I mean, once you're kind of hooked, that's it. Like hook, line, and sinker, like you're never going away. It's like imbued in your life. But then what happens is as your tempo gets stronger, as your body gets stronger, which is your temple where your spirit resides, your spirit blossoms and becomes all encompassing. Your spirit grows. And that was what I noticed with fitness. And so I totally get it's the same thing with yoga, probably even more so because of the meditative and all the other aspects of it.
Definitely.
So I'd like to get into the how yoga intertwines with the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. But before we start talking about that, we should probably explain what are the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system.
Yeah, sounds good. So the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems are part of the autonomic nervous system, which is body functions that we don't have to think about, like our heartbeat and our digestion. So the parasympathetic system is associated with rest and digest mode, and the sympathetic is associated with alert mode. If we're at either end of the spectrum, so if we're at the end range, so to speak, of the parasympathetic nervous system, we're going to be super, super sluggish. If we're at the end range of the sympathetic nervous system, we're in fight, flight, freeze, fawn, those kinds of things, those like hyper alert kinds of states.
Yeah, and some people are in those state, they're out of balance, right? I see that. I've seen that. I've experienced that. I'm sure most of us have. Where like sometimes you're in that fight or flight, go, 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 A-type personality, and then all of a sudden, bam, you hit the floor. And then you're in the opposite end of the spectrum. And then once you get a little bit of rest and recovery, you're peaked again, and then bam, you hit the floor again. So I assume that if you really understand how yoga plays a role and interacts, and the types of yoga plays a role with these two systems, that you could probably balance that out where you're not hitting these huge peaks and valleys, and that you can actually be more stable and feel more continued energy.
Exactly. So the practice gives us this container to be sympathetic and parasympathetic, and to create more tone in both spaces, and to learn how to go between them more seamlessly with more ease.
Oh, I like that. And so when we think of parasympathetic and sympathetic, it almost sounds like one's good and bad, right? Because when you go, 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 you feel good, but then when you hit rock bottom and you're feeling sluggish, I think most people don't really particularly care to be in that state. But it doesn't necessarily mean that one state is better than another state. Can you explain that and why that's the case?
Yeah, one is definitely not better than the other. We're flowing between those states during the day, but we don't want to typically stay in one for long periods of time. And we need to be alert. We need to pick up the laundry basket. We need to do our workout. We need to work and make calls and do the things that we need to do. If we're doing too much of that, it's going to create stress. And then we also want to be able to get to that relaxed point at the end of the day or little breaks between the day so we can restore. So we need both to live an active life.
And it sounds like, and per our conversations, like when you're peaking and valleying, when you have these big sways, that's not necessarily ideal, but there should be like an ebb and flow, right? Where you're like a little more high energetic and then you're a little bit, slower, maybe not as, in the zone, but you're, more in a relaxed state, and then maybe you're on and then you're off. But that ebb and flow is more gentle and easier on your body, easier on your adrenals, easier on the impacts of being in a high stress state, like when we produce more cortisol, and that impacts our hormones. So we can use yoga, by the sounds of it, to create more of this gentle ebb and flow. And the way to do that is probably taking part in classes that are going to align with what your needs are.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yoga is not one size fits all. So, we go through different, I call them life seasons. So I've had periods of chronic illness, and during that time, a vigorous practice didn't work for me. I needed a slower, gentler kind of practice, a slow flow or restorative class, or maybe I could, as I was feeling better, I could do a couple of like medium sort of intensity classes and then balance that with more of the restorative sorts of classes. So we have these phases that we go through in life. Times where we're super busy, we may want to balance out with gentler classes. Times where maybe we don't have quite as much going on, maybe those are the times that we want to go for the Ashtanga classes, the more vigorous times. And then it's also a process of getting to know your body, and you try things and you see how your body responds. Sometimes when there's a lot going on, it does feel good to take a vigorous class. Sometimes we're working through things, we're working out things that we need to work out that maybe we're not mentally working out, but we're working out through our tissues. So that's another part of yoga, is just trying, listening, finding what works, and then keep going with that process. See how you feel after you take a vigorous class. See how you feel after you take a restorative class, and then you get to know, oh, this class is going to work for me right now. This class, works for me at another time.
That completely makes sense to me. It's intuitive, like in a sense, right? Or maybe conscious is probably the better way to look at it. You're being mindful and you're listening to your body. So I've been in a state, and I'm sure many of us have, where like you're go, 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 and you have a lot of stress going on. And then you do something more intense and it shuts you down because it's too much. You've just kind of overused your system. Right. And sometimes you're go, 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 and you have so much stress that like you need to get rid of some of that energy.
Right, exactly.
So paying really close attention. Years ago, I had a Qigong instructor at one of my gyms, and he noticed that I would do the same thing. He noticed that I would go through these burnout stages, and we had a conversation about it. And this ties into what you were saying. He said that when your adrenals they kind of go into like a hyperactive mode, and it's when you're going and you're going and you're going and you're going, and then you're starting to kind of like run low on energy, your system's starting to feel overused, and your adrenals right before shutting down will go into a hyperactive mode. And sometimes and then when that happens, we feel stronger, we feel more intense, we feel like, oh, we can go forever. And he said, when you're feeling that way, that's an indicator that you need to back off. Because if you go beyond that point, that's when you end up in burnout mode. And to me, what you're saying, it sounds like if you note that's happening, if you've been going and going and going, and all of a sudden you get like this burst of energy, like over a period of time, whether it's a few hours or a few weeks, note that that burst of energy is your adrenals in hyperactive mode. And that would be a time to probably start implementing some more yin type of, more restorative types of yoga.
Yeah, restoring, nourishing, nurturing. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, and then I think the other thing too is like doshas. When you look at doshas, for those people out there that understand doshas, like my constitution is more pitta and vata, whereas somebody's constitution, what's your constitution? Do you know?
I have a lot of vata. I have a
lot of vata. Okay, a lot of creative energy in your head, a lot.
More pitta at other times, but right now I have a lot of vata, which is just for the listeners, it's a lot of, they say the air element. So like you might be really creative, but you need to ground. You need the earth element, the water element to ground, to slow down.
Yep, and Pitt is that fire element, like go, 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 do, do, do. That's the person that walks real fast and talks real fast, and they're always doing and going, and they're like, yep. You know. And then Kapha, that's that person who's like slow and steady. You can't really get under their skin. They kind of are consistent. Yep. You can't ruffle their feathers. Once they get going, they're like a freight train. They can just keep plowing through forever. It's amazing, but they're very grounded.
Yes.
And so you can also take, so when you're in balance with those constitutions, then your system is working pretty smoothly, right? Like health is what you attain when that happens. But when those systems are out of balance, you can start to apply some of the different types of yoga to create balance and bring your body back to health as well, it sounds like.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, you know, again, like a little bit of experimentation. So even though I have a lot of that vata in my system, I might do a grounding, but kind of physically intense exercise, like almost like a squat, and hold that, but I'm breathing through it. So it's like I'm channeling the air element instead of letting it go all crazy, and my feet are grounded. So I'm getting that earth element. And that's why we practice, right? We keep practicing, and that's that growth element. Again, keep listening, keep learning, experimenting, see what happens, see what's serving you at this time. Make a mental note or physical notes in a journal, and keep exploring and practicing.
I like that. I think that sounds like a great plan of action. The reason why I brought up the different constitutions too, because when your body's out of balance, you can have all sorts of problems. You can have digestive problems, you can have, you know, inflammation related problems and other health related problems. And one of the things that we were going to talk about today is rest and digest. And so, you know, thinking about when your body's out of balance, dependent upon your constitutions or dependent upon your life, like rest and digest, there's a rest and digest mode actually. And if we can attain that, it actually helps our body to do what it's supposed to do. What is rest and digest mode?
Yeah, so rest and digest mode is that calming sense. It's associated with the vagus nerve, which is a super long nerve in the body. So activating that rest and digest mode, it's that feeling of calm, of ease, and then as a result we do digest better, we feel better, we can take a smooth deep breath without our shoulders up around our ears. Yeah, so we feel calm, we feel peaceful, we feel at ease. We also make better decisions when we're in that rest and digest mode.
Yeah, because you're not reactionary in nature. You're like thoughtful, you're mindful, right? There's that, you know,
reacting.
Yeah, mental state, that Venn diagram where it's like, you know, you got your intellectual state, you got your emotional state, and right where they cross there in the center, that's where you want to be, in that mindful little part. And when you're relaxed, you can be more mindful and not reactionary.
Yeah.
And digestion is important though. I think people think like, oh, I need to digest my food, otherwise I'll get acid reflux. But there's so much more to digestion than just, not digesting your food and then getting acid reflux. What are some of the things that you can share about digestion?
Oh yeah, sure. So one thing that I like to do before I eat is I like to look at my food. Actually, I have some berries here.
Oh yeah, show us.
So I like to look at the food. So like I'm getting present. I'm like even grounding my feet. And I take a couple of deep breaths to start to talk to that vagus nerve and to start to move into that rest and digest mode. I like to close my eyes because I do have that Vata personality. So I'm like, oh, squirrel, squirrel. Oh, there's something to do, So I close my eyes.
Guilty.
And I take a couple breaths. And I might smell my food. Oh, it smells pretty good, actually. And then I wait for some saliva to happen in my mouth, because that's also a symptom of parasympathetic. If I'm trying to like eat in a hurry and I'm not like letting the saliva happen because I'm in that like hyper alert or just a little too alert mode, if I don't have that saliva started, it's going to impact my digestion. So you want to get that saliva going. I'm going to just take a few calm breaths and then eat your food. It's going to support the complete processing of your food, the right speed of processing, right? Some of us are too fast, some of us are too slow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we don't, I know that's a kind of a weird topic, but I think it's a super important one because it impacts so many people and we don't talk about it.
It does. I mean, just slowing down. I mean, you hear stories about monks really being deliberate about eating and, spending a lot of time doing first, kind of being grateful for the food in front of you and thinking about the process of like somebody went and tilled the land and then they planted the seeds and they watered the seeds. And then from there, they cared for the crops and then harvested the crops, and then somehow that got packaged and then transported and then taken to wherever across sometimes the globe to make it into your grocery store. And then there's people at the grocery store that are working to be able to make sure that you can go through the checkout line and pay for that. And then you drive home and you prepare your food or you eat, rinse it however you might do, and then you eat it. And I think there's something really beautiful about that, because especially in this day and age, when food is so readily available, if we're not grateful for the process of like this interconnected globe of people working to make sure that you can have those berries in that bowl right now, like it kind of changes your consciousness around the amazing ability that humans have to be able to do the things that they do, and how much effort and time it takes for that food to end up on your table. And I think you just kind of look at things differently. And so then in that process of being grateful, and then for you to kind of take in through all your senses, what that food is, like the colors and the smells and the textures, and you take your time eating it. And I like the fact that you stop for a moment and you smell your food. So you cause your body to start the digestive juices flowing, because people who have things like acid reflux and they're having digestive issues, like maybe they're constipated, maybe they're going to the bathroom too frequently. Sometimes it's just a matter of like eating too fast, eating the wrong things, not being cognizant, not being mindful of what you're eating, not being grateful for what you're eating, and taking the time to allow your body to prepare to eat that food. And then when you eat it more slowly, it allows your body the time to be able to digest the food, absorb the nutrients, and give you what you need from that food, and then eliminate what you don't need. So it's really so much more than just, oh, I got acid reflux because I ate something. Maybe you're not taking your time.
That gratitude is also a good thing to talk to the parasympathetic nervous system.
And that to me also ties into like what happens when we don't digest our food. There are implications to that. What are some of the implications to not digesting your food properly?
Yeah, so I mean, it could go as far as malnutrition. A lot of people don't feel well after they eat. They're getting reflux, or they're getting a belly ache, or they feel bloated, or in some way uncomfortable, right? Yeah, don't they don't feel well.
And then I think that it's related to the food that they ate, and it can be related to the food that they ate. But sometimes, you hear about people getting bloated when they're eating really healthy foods, and it may be because they're not taking their time and that they're not going through this very grateful process.
Yeah, that's definitely a factor to consider. Definitely, you're gonna support yourself if you can get parasympathetic before you eat. And then, if you know you're parasympathetic, you're in that calm space and you're still having troubles, then that's, maybe to consult a naturopath or somebody else or an acupuncturist or, a GI doctor, somebody who can, give you more assistance. But that's definitely a really important step for digestion is to get the parasympathetic, because that's when it works in the optimal way.
Yeah. And another thing that impacts digestion is trauma. And you and I have talked about that a lot. And that can put you in that state that's fight or flight, even if trauma happened as a child. Like you may have some mechanisms that are still in place in the way you cope with stress in your life that you don't even realize are there. So if you're not digesting your food properly, it could be related to old trauma that hasn't been resolved.
That is true. Yeah. And there's trauma sensitive yoga. So it takes into account traumas that people have experienced. There's therapy, there's heart math, there's tapping. There are all kinds of ways to teach your body that it's safe. And that's another part of the parasympathetic nervous system, is a feeling of safety. And if we've had experiences where we didn't feel safe, especially prolonged periods, we can, our neurological system can be stuck in that as a default pattern. I personally have had a fair amount of trauma. I mean, I think all beings have, but it really showed up for me after a very good friend took his life and died very unexpectedly. It was very hard. It was very traumatic. And that's how I started learning about trauma and how our bodies can get stuck in these states. But I just want to really let people know that there are lots of possibilities out there to shift that state. And on the other side is post-traumatic, they call it post-traumatic growth. So using these very difficult traumatic experiences and turning them into assets. Often, we need support to do that. It can be pretty hard to do just on your own, at least I think. But that is possible. So if anybody out there has experienced trauma and you're still experiencing the effects, negative effects of trauma, it is possible to turn that into a growth experience. Maybe not right away, but it is possible.
Yeah, like finding the empowerment in it. I've heard, I know Anthony Robbins is someone that I've listened to over the years, and he talked about like there can be some really trying experiences in somebody's life where sometimes you can't get past the trauma of what happened. But if you can find some like purpose in it, like maybe this happened to me so I can help other people, or maybe this happened to me because it shifted the trajectory of my life. When you can find that empowering thing, that empowering psychological stance on what happened, it kind of shifts your psyche into not being as traumatized. So I would assume that that ties into what you're talking about when it comes to post-traumatic growth. I really like that term.
Yeah. So that's definitely a mindset piece. And, it's possible that we can do it on our own and we might need support. And I just want people to never feel shame if they need support to do that. Because this is hard stuff, and it can get really wired into our systems. So I just want people to feel supported if they need some extra help. if they're suffering because trauma has happened, there's a lot of support out there to shift, to get into that post-traumatic growth stage.
I like your reference that you can get wired. I've always often referred to, the process I went through in healing my trauma as unraveling the years of trauma. Like just like taking this ball of tangled up mess, right? That's kind of imbued in every aspect of, your emotional well-being, your physical well-being, your psychological, and even your spiritual well-being. And you just got to unravel that mess, unwind it. And it takes a lot of different things. So the yoga practice can be a big part of that to help unraveling some of that trauma. And then the other thing is you do Thai yoga massage as well. So body work is often very helpful in unraveling some of that trauma as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really good opportunity to get into that parasympathetic state and to receive in a space of safe touch, respectful touch.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have gone through trauma. They don't realize that they a lot of times have a hard time receiving, because trauma is usually like a power position of a victim and perpetrator. And the victim is in a state of where something's been taken from them, right? Whether it's neglect or the fact that something bad happened to them. And maybe they are not used to being in positions where they feel comfortable receiving. And that's part of the unraveling process or the growth process.
Yeah, we can want to stay in that alert mode because it feels safer there. So it can definitely be a process of learning to receive again. And that's also a reason why I'm really mindful with the body work. And if I see people's like faces grimacing, I check in. Occasionally, from my perspective, that's okay. But if somebody is lying on the mat and then all of a sudden their face is squishing up and they're in pain, they just went into sympathetic dominance. They just went into fight or flight. So I really like to tend to not just muscles, but to look at the big picture of the whole person and their nervous system, as well as their tissues. So I think that's really important to look at that whole picture and to not spend a lot of time in a massage in that squished up face mode.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're not relaxed if you're in a squished up face mode. Definitely not in that relax and digest state.
Yeah.
So we've talked about, parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, what yoga really is, which is more than just, a class that you take to relax and become more flexible, and then how yoga and various techniques can help you to relax so that you can do things like digest your food better. And a lot of people, I think, are thinking, great, I can do that. I'll start taking the right classes. But you talk about integrating yoga into your daily life outside of the classroom. How can somebody do that? I find that an interesting concept.
Yeah. So one of my favorite ways is humming in the car. If somebody likes to chant, that's good too. Singing too. They all support the parasympathetic nervous system. But that's something, you hear people humming as they're working. That's a great way to talk to your parasympathetic nervous system, to rest and digest mode. So humming in the car is one that I love. I've done this through Tai Chi, is that we pick a point in our house or maybe a few points. And when you pass that point, every time you pass that point, you take a deep breath. So the taking a deep breath before eating, getting into that rest and digest mode. I also like if I'm feeling that like over energized kind of state, I'm like out somewhere in public, I might go into a bathroom stall and do basically like the bottom part of a squat position and hold that with some deep breaths to move that energy in more constructive, more intentional ways. I know the bathroom's not always a place we'd like to take a deep breath, but if you need it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I understand that. But just implementing it in places that you can, quietly do that and get away from the public.
Yeah. Yeah. Like anytime you notice that your breath is choppy, or we're doing all this Zoom all the time too, right? So you can see your shoulders. So if you notice, one shoulder is coming forward or back, just take a moment to soften your shoulders and sit up tall.
Yeah. So now you've talked about like applying the right type of yoga classes early on, in these techniques to be able to implement it into your life. But it sounds like people should be a little bit more aware of what's going to be right for them. Is there a way for individuals to assess what classes are going to align with them and what their needs are?
Yeah, I think it's good to first assess yourself. Like, what are my goals right now? What are my needs? And then to look at the class descriptions. So don't just look at the title, but look at the description. And then perhaps even call the studio and say, like, hey, this is where I am right now. This is what I see that this class is about. Does it sound like it's going to help me meet my needs or meet my goals for where I am right now? So, like, if you said to me, I'm in perimenopause, I am at the height of my career, I'm taking care of aging parents, and I've still got kids that I'm nurturing at home, and I'm feeling tired all the time, I would say don't go to a vigorous yoga class right now. Perhaps try a slow flow, perhaps try a restorative or a yin class, also where you're getting good alignment instruction, so you're supporting your joints too.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody had, like, they wanted to start to build more muscle and they had some exercise base, then maybe they try some beginners classes, go through intermediate, and then maybe they try a powerful flow, but to progress and not just jump in to the powerful class or the most vigorous class right away. There can be times definitely where that's appropriate. Like if you're a weightlifter and you want to do some cross training, that might be totally appropriate. But assessing yourself, reading the whole description of the class, and perhaps even calling the studio so you don't waste your time, going there, your money, going there, taking the class, and then you're like, oh, if I would have asked some questions, I would have found out right away this wasn't what I need.
Yeah. And then also paying attention to how you feel afterward.
Absolutely.
So if you feel invigorated, if you feel relaxed, whatever the outcome is that you're looking for, if you're looking to feel restored, or if you're looking to feel, more fatigued because you had a stressful day and you need to get some of that energy out, that would be the time to kind of reevaluate whether you made the right decision.
For sure. Yep. Yep.
Great. So, and that goes with yin and yang personalities too. So it just ties it in. Some people are go, 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 and some people are, more kapha and kind of slower. And so, you can balance out and have benefit on your health. Like a kapha personality tends to do better if they're in balance with that more vigorous yoga versus, somebody who's pitta go, go, go. They tend to do better with the types of yoga practices that are a little more restorative and relaxing in nature so that they don't burn out to balance. And then the vata people, the people in their heads, like you were saying, they need to be more grounded. Yeah. And so, thank you for coming today. I think this has been really informative. It's taken yoga in my mind to a whole new place that I never really thought of. And I think for others, it'll be the same. And you do some really unique things. You help people, you consult people, and you work with people to help them find the right types of practices for them. Tell us a little bit more about how you do that.
Oh, sure. So I just think there's such a spectrum with yoga, so many different practices we can employ. So I like to get to know people. I like to do a really thorough assessment, find out about what their goals are, what their needs are, if they have pain, what's going on in their body, to hear a little bit about their life history, and then to design a practice that works for them, and to also support their alignment. so that when they're engaging their muscles, they're getting the full benefit. I mean, I've even found myself just very recently, I was doing some lengthening and it wasn't working and I couldn't figure out why. And it was because my spine wasn't aligned. So this wasn't working well when my spine wasn't aligned. So I like to take all those pieces together. If there's trauma, definitely bring in that trauma informed kind of perspective. I mean, we've all had trauma to some degree for sure, but if there's something specific that someone knows about and they're working with, just to bring in those practices to create a really supportive container for that person that's going to meet their needs effectively and efficiently and with as much joy as possible.
I like that. Joy.
Yeah.
Joy should be a big part of lifestyle and everyone's routine.
Yeah, definitely. I don't like to see people squishing their faces up in yoga class either.
Right. Not a good thing based upon what we learned today. So how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's www.sageyogabeth.com. I have a Facebook and an Instagram at Sage Yoga and Healing Arts LLC. And my email is support@sageyogabeth.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for joining us. This has been great.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'm so glad that we made it happen. We've known each other so long. We always get into these deep conversations, and now we got to share one of those conversations with everyone else in a way that I think will be impactful and help to elevate others.
Good.
So thank you, viewers, for joining us today and watching this video, and hopefully you've learned something new that you didn't know before. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube, follow our social media channels, and watch out for other upcoming videos about unique topics like the one today. Namaste.
Namaste.